Okie dokie, we are live. So again, thank you everyone who is able to make it. This is our first Testimony Tuesday meeting. We will be having these every Tuesday and we'll be having a different speaker each week. You can get the information on the website. I'm actually going to type it in the chat. Okie dokie, we are live. So again, thank you. Oops, sorry about that. Oh, can you not see me? Are you talking about me or about Judith? Because Judith has her camera off. So I don't know. Huh. I wonder why some can see me and some can't. I do have my camera on.
I can see you fine. I don't know.
Okay. It says you have disabled my video. Oh, whoops. Let me.
Oh, I guess I can talk.
Here, I'll turn on your camera you need. Okay. How about now?
Ah, perfect.
Okay. Those who can't or couldn't see me, can you see me now? No?
I
That
can
is
see myself.
so strange. Okay, well, I'm not the spotlight today, so I guess it doesn't really matter. So I am Victoria. For those who don't know me personally, my name is Victoria Flores, and I am the director of our family ministry, Some Flores Farm Ministries. We are going to be having these Testimony Tuesdays weekly, so we'll be having one next week and the week after, and we will have this schedule out on our website because some weeks, it'll be holidays or something. And so that way when we'll have them and when we won't. That link is in the chat now. There we go. And so you can go there and you can see all the speakers and everything. And for those who don't know, our family ministry has a lot of branches to it. We are doing medical missionary work. So I've given cooking classes. I make a lot of content on YouTube and Facebook, Instagram, sharing different natural remedies and just different topics like that. We try to promote country living. We do have, as the name suggests, yes, Joseph, we do have a channel. It is called Some Flores Farm Ministries. Let me type that out. Oops, I misspelled ministries, but yeah, it's Some Flores Farm Ministries. And we do promote country living. And as the name suggests, it is not a huge farm. It is on the smaller scale, but we do grow a lot of what we eat. We have right now we're harvesting corn and cabbage, a lot of green beans and peas and lettuce and just a variety of things, which we also have that content on our YouTube channel. So for those who are interested, we have our YouTube, our Instagram. On Instagram, we are someflores.farm. And on Facebook, we are also Some Flores Farm Ministries. So you can find us on there. Now today we have our guest speaker, Judith. So right now we'll have her introduce herself. But before we do, if we could have a little icebreaker. Some of us here, I know we know each other from AFY, but for those who don't, where's everyone from? We kind of want to have an idea of what states are here today. So I personally here, we are located in New Mexico. You can put it in the chat or you can turn on your mic, whatever you wish.
Yeah, so I have it on my name, but I'm from Missouri.
We got someone from Missouri. We got New Mexico. Who else would like to share? Here we have Alyssa from Georgia. It's also on her name. New Mexico. So we got Oh, we have someone from California. Oh, someone from Canada. Oh, so we got quite a diversity of people in here. So that's good to know. That's cool. So thank you everyone who participated. So now I'll have Judith explain a little bit about who she is, where she comes from. We got someone from Mexico. That's awesome. Chiapas. Let's see, anyone else? I think that's everyone. So that's cool. We love to see a good group. So yeah, Judith, would you like to introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from?
My name's Judith, and I am living in New Mexico, 7 minutes away from Victoria. And I was previously living in Colorado, and previously to that, I grew up in Kansas,
Okay,
grew up in Kansas.
you've been quite around. You've been quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
So here, we're here to hear your testimony. So we can start. Well, before actually you start that, I just want to let you all know these are Testimony Tuesdays, and the purpose of Testimony Tuesdays is to see how God can work in people's lives. Because sometimes we say, oh, that would never happen to me, or we see all these miracles happening to other people, and oh, that would never happen to me. But God works in everyone's lives in a different way. And so here we're going to be, through all this series of Testimony Tuesdays, be spotlighting a whole variety of people from a whole different backgrounds, because we're trying to show that God can work in your life too. So Judith, would you say that you grew up in a Christian household or in the church? What's a little bit about your childhood?
So I grew up, both of my parents growing up were in the church. So a little background about my dad, he was wild. He did it all. He left home from a young age, ended up selling drugs, doing drugs, alcoholic, working. And so eventually he gave his life to God. And so my childhood, both of my parents were going to church, but my mom was always more spiritual, and my dad was always struggled. But eventually he left the church, which that's kind of where my story starts.
So, before we get into that story in detail, we'll go ahead and start with a word of prayer. So, if everyone could bow their heads, we'll go ahead and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity to get together this evening and listen to Judith's testimony. We thank you because we know that you have worked in her life and that you can work in each of our lives as well. We ask that you could be with those who couldn't make it, and that you can bless those who are also watching through other platforms. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Alrighty, so that is, I guess, your parents, right? So how would you say that affected you when you were a child?
It was a little, sorry, I muted it. It was a little confusing because I would see my mom did everything she could. She did everything she could to bring us to God. She put us in private Adventist school. She would read our lessons to us. We'd go to church. We participated in Pathfinders. We did all of that. But then I would see my dad, not very, he was involved, but more for fun. He was the fun guy in church. We always had vespers at our house, games and sports, but spiritually it was a struggle for him.
And so it was pretty confusing yeah, because you had this really like spiritual mom and this sort of iffy, your dad didn't have the best relationship with God, you could say, right? And so
Yeah.
I mean, your childhood, you say, your mom would take you to church, go to you would have vespers at your house. So would you say that you say you were confused, right? About, well, how your upbringing was a little confusing. How did that affect your own personal spiritual life? Spiritually speaking, did you kind of look for God, or were you sort of like, I don't know about this?
Yeah, it was kind of, I would see I would see it kind of boring because my dad was he was fun, not gonna lie. He was very fun. So I'm like, oh man, this is kind of like, I don't know about this. Do I want to sit there for hours? And it's crazy because you hear these stories and you hear the stories of the Bible, and I didn't really have a relationship with God. I went to church, but I didn't have a relationship with God until when I really did end up having a relationship with God years later. I'm like, oh wow, I definitely didn't have any kind of true relationship, true communication with God.
So you say it was like till way later that that sort of sparked, but we'll go back to it was sort of boring for you and all that stuff. I feel like a lot of youth might be able to relate to that. How old were you when you started, comparing that, oh, this is fun and this is not so fun?
Let's see. That's a good question. Uh, I was probably a little older because I mean, I had a good time, but it was probably when I was like around 13-ish, probably when I was a teenager, when I was like, you know what, I don't have to be here.
Mhm. And so you sort of that's when you started questioning it. Did there ever come a point when you were like, oh, I don't want to go to church at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did that go about? Give us a little bit of background of how you made that decision. Did you feel any regret? Did give us a little bit more detail about that?
Okay. So another thing about me is my parents got divorced when I was 13 or 14. So my dad, before they got divorced years back, he left the church. And once I didn't realize at that moment how much that affected me. And so in a way I was kind of rebelling. I didn't want anything to do with God. I didn't it's it's crazy because looking now as an adult, I look back to my teenage years and say, wow, that really affected my whole life. And it's sad because I feel like in our, what is it, as a Latina, as a Mexican, it's kind of like, oh, you're not depressed. You're not, no, no, you get over it. I didn't really have anyone to talk about my feelings with. And even if I did, I know I could always talk to my mom, but it was kind of like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. I was raised to not really talk about a lot of things.
And so that you kind of started, I guess, storing it away. And so around what age was the divorce, would you say?
It was around, I was like 13 or 14. It was like when I was going to start high school. And so I always went to a pretty much, except like 1 year or two when I was very like kindergarten and first grade, but I went to an Adventist private school. So, I mean, it was kind of, I was, how do you say it? I was kind of, how would I say the word? I'm sorry. Sheltered. I was
Mhm.
sheltered from everything. And so I was still kind of rebelling in that school, but I mean, it was like 12 of us, and it was like from kindergarten to 8th grade. But when I went to public high school, man, public high school kids are crazy. And I remember my first day, they were making dirty jokes and all this, and I was like laughing. I had no idea what any of them meant, but I would just laugh. And I started kind of hanging out with them and started being friends with them, and that's when I kind of started getting into the bad influences of drinking and smoking. And it was kind of like I was trying to escape reality. I was trying to hide my emotions, trying to not to think about things.
Yeah, so the would you say that the divorce, if your parents had not been divorced, would that have affected your spiritual life, or you think either way you probably would have just
I
gotten
think it Sorry, I think it played a big role because if my dad would have stayed in the church, I would have never seen that side. Because a
yeah.
lot of people say, unfortunately, I wasn't strong enough, but a lot of people say, oh, I'll never be like whatever parent is
Yeah.
going through something tough. Unfortunately, I said that, but I ended up doing as I saw.
Mhm.
I saw my dad do all that, and I I copied him.
And I feel like a big thing that you said is you kept it all to yourself and you didn't ever talk to anyone. Do you think if there would have been like a strong, if you would have seen someone like in the church that you could have talked to, if you would have been able to build a relationship with someone, if that would have changed things for you because you would have had someone else to look to?
Yeah, maybe. I've never been really one to share with
Okay.
people, but I
Mhm.
definitely think if I would have personally had a stronger relationship with God, that would have that would have changed everything.
Okay. And so you say it was in your last year of high school that you started being exposed to these things and you didn't, because you were sheltered, you didn't know what any of these jokes meant, you didn't know, but you were trying to escape, right? And so
Yeah.
around this time is when you started really getting into the worst things, right? Um, Previous to that, you hadn't gone out looking for anything, was it just in that last year that you started getting more involved in
Yeah,
like
it was actually my first year of high school.
Oh, first year of high school. Okay. So you were probably like what, 15,
14.
14, 15, yeah, 14. So you're pretty young. And I feel like that's something we might see a lot nowadays, people being exposed to these things and not with so much, in your case, it was divorce. We see that almost 50% of, parents get divorced nowadays. Um, for you were looking for that escape. How did you start getting like deeper and deeper? What exactly did you start doing, or what started going on around that time?
Okay, so this is gonna be story time and answer. So this one's gonna take a little longer.
Okay, that's fine.
So I actually started high school, and my first semester I was innocent. I had the most innocent mind. I was invited and people would be like, "You want to skip school?" And I'm like, "For what? Like what are we going to do, you know?" Anyways, I the second semester I started playing sports from whenever it started. So I really enjoy sports and any kind of activities. And so I went to school. I got enough good grades to keep playing because you can't play sports if you don't have good grades. But I started meeting the girls there, the girls on the soccer team, and the girls like anything really. They were partying. Like we would go out of town for a game and come back, and they'd be like, "Oh, well, we should go to my house to drink." And I'd be like, "Okay, I guess." And they'd have older boyfriends, so they'd be like, "Oh, come on, let's go." And so I started going. And so little by little, I feel like when I was 14, it was kind of like drinking and like maybe smoking weed. And, it was nothing intense my first year of high school. And then each year, little things would get introduced, little like pills, little, maybe cocaine. And so after a while, we like probably maybe sophomore, junior, that's when things started getting like we would leave school all the time and we started doing more things, more intense things. And then my senior year was just I barely went to school because after your second semester, you can drop a lot of your classes. Like the school lets you drop classes just to get enough for you to graduate, which I don't know why they give you that option, but I took it. I took it, and I ended up leaving sports, which I regret it because obviously I regret everything, but it gives me a story to tell and I can help others. But I was able I don't want to toot my own horn, but I was really good at soccer. So the coach would tell me, "No, you need to stay. Like the coaches are coming, you're gonna get a scholarship, you can get a free ride to college, like you just have to continue." Well, after a while, a lot of the so-called friends were like, "Nah, let's just leave soccer. It'll give us more time to do crazy things." So my last year on senior year, I stopped playing soccer. Just halfway through, I just stopped playing soccer, and that kind of I played tennis too for a while, but everything kind of went downhill because as a young person, it's kind of you have to be busy all the time. You have to keep your mind busy and you have to have good friends. Otherwise, you don't have really a purpose to anything and anyone can kind of push you around.
And so during this time, was this already a public school or was it an Adventist school?
Yeah, so high school, I went to a public school. I
Okay.
wanted to go to a boarding school that my brother went to, an Adventist boarding school,
Mm.
but my mom couldn't just, she's like, I couldn't let you go. I couldn't let you go. And so I also, we always think of that too. What would have my life been if I would have gone? There's so many what
Yeah.
ifs, but
And so I feel like that might be hard, the what ifs, but like you mentioned earlier, God sort of has a way of playing things out, and right in the end, now you have the story to tell. And while this was happening, was your mom still in church? Did your dad still have some sort of influence in, during this time, or what was the situation with your parents during this time?
so my mom always has continued to be strong. My dad, he moved 30 minutes away. I would see him sometimes, which is another thing that affected me because I love my dad, but I always say he's the first guy that broke my heart because I remember that he would say, "Oh, I'm going to go pick you up." And then I'd wait and wait, and he never came. And then the next week, "Oh, I'm going to," and I always believed him. I always believed him. So deep down, that that hurt me, you know? So I was like, you know what? Forget this. What's the point of feeling things? I was always feeling sad and hurt, which led to, you know what? I'm just going to do whatever.
And so that if you're since your dad wasn't there, that kind of added even more. Was it just the divorce? It was the fact that your dad wasn't there for you throughout those years, right? And
Yeah.
so would your mom ever talk to you about going to church, or would she ever like be inviting you? Did she kind of just stay out of it? Like what did she do while you were, partying and doing all these things?
I still went. I still went and I still, she'd always be like telling me, pray, you need to have a relationship with God. And, she's always been a motivator. She's always been my motivator, but I didn't want to hear any of that at the time. I was in my rebellious teen years.
Okay. And so you could be doing all these things, but Saturday you're always at church, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so while you were there, were you doing it more out of like, did you ever feel like maybe this is like right and I'm missing out? Or did you just not have any form of regret? You were just like, forget this, I don't care.
Yeah, I didn't have any form of regret at the time. Not really. It's kind of sad to think about just because I was so, in a way, I was just numb.
Mm.
But after after high school, I started working as a server in a sports bar. Kind of like I served food, took orders. But one thing that people doesn't know about the food industry is that there's a lot of drugs and alcohol in the background. So I was taking some classes in college and I decided to drop out and work full time because I was making really good money. But there, you end up becoming like really close because they're working your same hours, the people working there. And so you start after work, you're like, oh, well, let's just drink. And then it becomes during work. And then it becomes, like all day. And like when I graduated high school, it came to a point where we were just drinking every day. We were just getting drunk every single day, doing drugs every single day. And then every time, ever since I started, like 14 years, every time it'd get worse. Every time it'd get worse because, you eventually get used to those things. So you're looking, oh, well, this is stronger. Wow, this feels good. And then you're looking for something stronger. So I started working there and I asked a girl if she could get me something specific. And she ended up giving me something else, but I knew my stuff. And so I was like, hey, this isn't it. This is something stronger. It was something hardcore, but it was cheaper and more effective. So that's how I started slowly getting into like more intense things. I was like, didn't want to deal with feelings, didn't want to deal with anything.
And so you weren't so interested in church. Did you still believe there was a God out there, or was that kind of out of the question too?
Yeah. So I so when I started getting into more deeper things, I always knew in the back of my head, like, this isn't, once I got older, when I was a teenager, I didn't really care about anything. But once I got older, I started realizing that, oh man, this isn't right. I should stop. Once I started doing more hardcore things, and I ended up getting to the point where I was working like 6 to 7 hours, and I would just like, whoa, what just happened? I don't remember any of that. And I started getting so like into it, and where it was like all day long, all night long. And then it's crazy how the devil like pulls you in so deep. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop. But the more I stop, I would pray to God. I'm like, Lord, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like it starts as like, oh, a little bit, and then it's kind of like sin. You open up that little wedge, and then it just kept growing and growing and growing. And so I remember praying, Lord, please help me. I don't want to, I'm done. And eventually I got to the point where it was like, I don't deserve to talk to God. I don't deserve to, I'm nothing, I'm a failure. And how embarrassing for me to even pray. But I knew that he was real. I knew that he was real. Sometimes I'd be in a house with a lot of people, and I'd sit there and be like, Lord, forgive me, forgive me. I always knew that he was there, but I didn't feel worthy anymore. I didn't feel worthy to talk to him. I didn't feel worthy to even go to church. My mom would invite me Fridays, and she'd be like, come on, Judith, she'd call me, let's go to church tomorrow. And I'd be like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm going to go, and I'm just going to change my life. And every single time I decided that, someone would always call me that night. Hey, I got this and this, like, come hang out. And I'd be like, oh, and I'd go, and I didn't go to church the next day. But I wanted to so bad. I just wanted to, come back to God, but I couldn't. I didn't have the power, the self-control.
And so again, it kind of goes back to the very beginning. If you would have had that relationship with him, this probably wouldn't have happened because you would have had that connection. And so what would you recommend to someone who doesn't necessarily want to have a relationship with God, but knows that they probably should?
It's it's amazing. If even just praying, I remember just praying, Lord, I don't I feel like I don't want to do this. I don't want to be in church. I don't, but I know I need to. It's the truth. The whole time I knew it was the truth. I remember, it's true, that promise that, my mom grew me up in the Lord's way, and it was always in my mind. It was always in the back of my head, everything. And not only that, but seeing my mom's relationship with God, my mom, no matter what was going on, even during my most intense times, my mom was praying, she was fasting. The church was praying, the church was fasting, and I just see her relationship with God. And that now, as a mature person, because before I was so immature, now as a grown mind, you don't have to be a grown up, you just have to have a grown mind, thinking of my mom's relationship with God, how that now has changed my life, looking back to her, how she's been my whole life. And I'm like, man, I want to have a relationship with God like that, be able to talk to him, be able to cry with him, be able to, that person you can talk to. I'm not one to open up with everyone, but I can open up with God, knowing that you have that friend that's always listening to you. It's amazing.
And so that kind of reminds me of the first question that I asked. If you had had that person in church you could look up to, maybe even then you wouldn't have talked to them, but knowing that Jesus is there, you can talk to him. And so, in other words, even if you don't feel it, force it in a way,
Yes.
because over time, even if you start off with, I don't know, maybe 10-15 minutes reading the Bible, starting to strengthen that little by little. At first, we know religion isn't about feelings. It's about knowing what's truth and what's not, right? And so in your case, maybe things would have been different, even if you would have forced things a little, even if you didn't feel like it, right? And so
Yeah.
I see that this went on from 14, year 14, 15, 16, 17, right? So when did things start changing? When did you start, like, how did God start working? Because here you say you have this battle of God, I want to, but I can't. I want to, but I can't. Satan keeps getting in the way. What happened that changed things completely?
I just remember one day waking up, and so I would go on days without sleeping, like days on days. And then I would, I'm gonna cry. I would look over to, I didn't live with my mom. I would look over and she'd be on her knees praying for me. And then I'd go back to sleep and wake up and there was food for me there. And then um I was like, man, what am I doing to my mom? My mom looked, she looked so bad. She looked so bad. And I remember, hold on. I didn't think I was gonna cry.
Oh, it's okay.
I
Take
remember I remember looking at her and being like, what am I doing? And I've never told anyone this before. I've never said it in my testimony, but I'm gonna say it today that when I was on drugs, I was possessed. I felt possessed because one day my mom came over. I weighed 90 pounds. I'm 5'5". I weighed 90 pounds and I looked like I was dying. And she said, "You're not going anywhere." And I said, "I'm leaving, mom." And she's like, "You're not going anywhere." And so she put me to the ground. She pinned me to the ground and we were wrestling and I bit her. I bit her so hard and I took off running. I took off running and I that's the moment I was like, what am I doing? I like, who am I? And so I I decided I didn't, people are like, how did you not go to rehab? How did this? And I'm like, God, because I decided one day, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. And I called my mom. I was like, Mom, can I stay in your living room? Because people would look for me at my house, you know? And so I would stay in her living room. And I was like, I was just there, like sleeping all the time because I was recovering. And so I said, we need to go. I can't be here because people started looking for me at her house. How did they know where she lived? Who knows? But they started looking for me there. Like, hey, we want to hang out with her. Hey, like a lot of people. And I got a job and we said, you know what? We're going to leave this date. I don't know how we're leaving, but we're leaving because we didn't have money. We were struggling, you know, because I quit my job. My brother was paying rent. And my mom, you know, she was living her life, but worrying about me. So it was like she was just everywhere. And so we said, you know what? We're leaving on this day. And people would laugh at me. The people that I knew, they'd be like, you're not going anywhere. You're going to stay here for the rest of your life. And this is your life now. And, you know, trying to bring me down. And so I remember I started working at a gas station and we said, you know what? We're leaving. And this girl was like, can I get a ride? Because I had to go to like an hour away for training. And she's like, I was like, I didn't want to take her because as my family knows, I'm like, nah, I'd rather go by myself. And so I ended up taking her because my mom was like, it's always best to travel in two. And so I went and came back. And the next day she's like, can you give me another ride? Well, on the way there, I was driving and I'm from a really small town in Kansas. So you have to take like all these little back ways until you finally get to the highway. Well, when I was getting to the highway, I was like, oh man, there's a stop sign coming soon, but I don't see it. And I'm going like 65, you know, as the road says. And all of a sudden, I pass the highway and get on the dirt road and I start fishtailing because I was going too fast and I pushed on the brakes a little bit. And I was like, oh no, this is it. This is it. And a couple seconds later, my car starts rolling. It rolled off the road and rolled in the ditch. And I was I was unconscious. The girl didn't have her seatbelt on and she fell on me and I hit my head on the side of the glass and my head was bleeding. I can't see without my glasses or contact and I I just was passed out. I was unconscious, and that girl walked all the way to the closest sign past the highway to tell the ambulance where we were at. And I'm like, if it wasn't for her, I don't know what I would have done, because I didn't have shoes. I lost my phone because all the windows broke. My phone went flying. My glasses were nowhere to be found. So after that, the ambulance showed up, and I don't remember a lot of it, but they just kept saying that. I said, no, 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 just leave me here. It's okay. I don't have insurance. They forced me to get into the ambulance and went. And that's when God started, like working in our plan to leave. I prayed, God, I need to get out of here. Well, 3 days later, it never happens 3 days later, an insurance claim. But 3 days later, they call us from the bank and they're like, oh, we have your check, from your accident. And we're like, what? And we show up to the bank and they give us like 3 times more what the car is worth. They buy me new glasses. They buy me, like, they paid for everything. They paid for all the hospital bills, of course, because it was full coverage. And we said, this is it. We're leaving. It was 1 week before we set the date. And so that's how I left. That's how I left and moved to Colorado to start a new beginning.
And so you moved to Colorado. What happened there? By then you had already gotten off the drugs and stuff, right? So what exactly was this new beginning, and how did it direct you into the ministry that you're in now?
Okay. So unfortunately, I I started up. I didn't do hardcore drugs, but I drank a little bit and I smoked weed, and I started working, and I wasn't getting deep down in there, but I hadn't changed my life yet. And so I hadn't gone back to God, but in my mind was like, oh, this isn't so bad. I know how ridiculous, but I was like, oh, this isn't so bad. I'm not doing hardcore drugs. And I started working at different jobs and ended up at a bank at Wells Fargo. And so the people, banks are like restaurants, a lot of drugs, a lot of craziness. And so I said, you know what? I wasn't going to church still. I still wasn't going to church, but slowly I felt like I was doing better than before. And so I applied for nursing school. And my mom was like, why do you want to go to nursing school? And I'm like, because of the end of times, Mom. There's going to be a lot of people that need help, medical help, and I'm going to be the one to be there. And she's like, what do you mean? You're not even going to church. And I said, but I know it's the truth. I'll be back, like I'll be back when it's time. And my family would be like, you can't just leave when it's time to flee. You have to prepare yourself now. And I said, no, no, I'll be back later. And so my stepdad was like, well, if that's the reason you want to go into nursing school, you should go to Eden Valley. They have a medical missionary program that teaches you all of that. And I said, all right, I'll check it out. Well, I applied and they told me to send, an application and pastor referral. And I didn't know any pastors. I wasn't going to church, but there was a pastor that always come in and I would help him at the bank. He'd always come with his money all mixed up, the church money, and I would organize it and fix everything for him. And so I was like, hey, do you think you could write a referral for me? I know we don't know each other that well. And he said, of course I will. So he wrote that for me and I sent everything down to Eden Valley. Well, I didn't hear back from them. So I was like, whatever, I guess I'm not going. They messaged me 4 days before the program started. Congratulations, you've been accepted. And I said, what am I going to do? I can't just leave. And I'm like, but I've been praying for this. And I'm like, is this my time? Is this a sign? And so I'm like, I can't just leave. So I waited till like the last day on Friday. And I told my service manager, hey, I've been trying to get into a course and I was finally accepted. I need to take some months off. And she said, okay, that sounds good. You just need to fill this out and promise me you're coming back. Well, that weekend, I said, this is my last weekend ever doing anything. So unfortunately, I did it all. I did it all. And that Sunday, they drove me down to Eden Valley. And that was the day I started my new life. I've never touched any drug, drank any kind of alcohol. I haven't done anything since that first day I arrived at Eden Valley.
And that's crazy because even though you weren't into like hardcore like before, you said you did like everything, a little bit of everything the night before you went, right? Yet
Yeah.
it was not, was it like a temptation or it wasn't even a temptation to you once you were at Eden Valley? And also, what is Eden Valley for those who don't know?
Yeah. So Eden Valley is a wellness institute. It's they have a school, medical missionary school. They have a farm, and they have a lifestyle program for cancer, diabetes, for a lot of diseases that they treat naturally. And I never felt any temptation ever again after that day I gave my life back to the Lord.
And we could say that's all God too, right? Because that's crazy. Because in Kansas, you had stopped, you went to Colorado, fell again, and then after that moment, you just never. And Eden Valley is a Christian center, so you were surrounded by Christian people. I'm sure it was a big change for you, right?
Oh yeah. And so the devil was still trying to attack me in a different way because there was a couple people that would really give me a really hard time, and I had they didn't know, nobody knew my story. They just knew I grew up in the church, and but a lot of them didn't know I had just come back January. And so they would give me a hard time. They'd be like, well, if you're a Christian, why do you do this? If you're a Christian, and I'd be like, I don't need this. I don't need this. I'm out of here. And so my mom would call me. She's like, Judith, don't. The God has a plan for you, and the devil knows it. You need to stay there, and you need to be strong. And so I stayed, and a little to get off the little path a little bit. I still hadn't forgave myself for my mom, so I would I felt like I was depressed for a while because of everything I did to my mom, all the years I made her suffer. And I would just cry every single day. I would cry and I cry and I cry. I didn't forgive myself. And I would call my mom, Mom, I'm sorry. Mom, I'm sorry. And she told me a story, and she said, there's this lady that ran over her neighbor's dog, and she would bring it back to him. She brought it back to him and said, I'm so sorry. I ran over your dog. They love that dog. And so we forgive you. They cried together. We forgive you. And the next day she remembered, and she would pull up that buried dog and knock on the door. I'm so sorry. And they're like, what in the world? Like, it's okay. Like, we forgive you. And then the next day she'd cry, and she'd go up and unbury that dog and be like, I'm so sorry. And my mom's like, that's what you're doing. She's like, I forgive you. God forgives you. You have to accept forgiveness. And so after that, after I learned to forgive myself, because my mom forgave me, God forgave me because I asked him for forgiveness. So that changed everything with my relationship with God, forgiveness and apologizing, everything emotionally kind of started setting in, and I was able to really focus on my course. And then I graduated, and they asked me to stay as an intern. After I did my internship, they asked me to stay as a therapist. I ended up going to massage school. I ended up working with herbs back at Eden Valley. So it's kind of like all of that happened, all of that closure with, you know, mentally and emotionally, and then being able to really reconnect with God, being able to be surrounded by Christians that were supporting you. It's the environment of having good friends, good fellowship, Bible studies, being able to grow. It was just, it changed my life.
And so that's really wonderful to see how God just made that huge change in your life. And like you said, more than anything, the lingering was the whole forgiveness, the whole shame and all the guilt and everything that you had, but eventually you had that closure in God and all that forgiveness. And so now, how'd you end up in New Mexico? Just give us a little bit of a story about that.
So I ended up there at Eden Valley meeting my husband. We had a son, and I even though it's in the country, it's still like I wanted more country, you know, for my son to grow up away from all the craziness. And so my mom would call me, you need to come visit. You guys need to come over here. And so I was like, New Mexico. You know, I'm from Colorado, so I love the mountains, the rivers. I love everything. And so in my mind, I was like, New Mexico? What is it? Like dirt and cactuses? Well, I came to visit her and it's beautiful. It's beautiful over here. And I said, this is a perfect place to raise my son. And so I ended up coming to New Mexico, and I still go to Eden Valley once a year to teach. I used to go to South Dakota, and now um I go to churches every once in a while to do a health weekend. And so I always thought, if I move to the country, how am I going to continue to do, you know, my personal ministry? I like to teach and I like to do all that. And I feel like God opened a new doors to everything. Even with my massage business, I'm able to talk to them about natural remedies. I'm able to talk to them about God. They ask me a lot of questions, and it's, you know, it's like that verse, my favorite verse, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away, all things are become new. So I'm like, this is my new life. This is my new life. And I used to be ashamed of my past. I never gave my testimony. And the first time I did, it was at Eden Valley, and there was a student that said, he came up to me after crying and he said, I left last night. I left last night. I went to go get my 6-pack of beer and I left. And this morning I came for my things and I saw you talking, because he was my student. And he said, I heard your testimony and I just want to tell you. He was crying this whole time. He's like, I want to tell you that I'm going to stay for the whole program. And he stayed and he graduated. So that's when I realized it doesn't matter if your testimony is not that intense, it, or if it's too strong, it's going to help someone. It's, you know, so now I just, you know what, some people may look at me like, oh man, but others are going to say, wow, that's going to help, that helped me.
That's really great. And that goes for each and every one of us. Like she said, there's no testimony too small. God has worked in everyone's lives in one way or another, so we should never be ashamed of sharing. It's not it's what God has done in your life. It's not so much, oh, this is like, it's not a spotlight on your mistakes. It's a spotlight on what God has done in your life. And so that is Judith's story. We are so glad that you are back in the church, and she is my cousin. So, you know, we're very happy that her and my aunt are all close here. And yeah, we thank you, Judith, for all that. That was really wonderful. Right now, we'll have a couple minutes. If anyone has any questions they'd like to ask her on any, whether it be her story, something maybe spiritual, you know, a couple minutes, we'll let anyone ask anything they wish. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and let you all ask. And you can type it in, or you can turn on your microphone, whatever you'd like to do.
So Judith, first of all, thank you for sharing. That was a really, really powerful testimony. So do you have a ministry now, in New Mexico that you're doing? I might have missed that part, but like, do you have like, what are you doing there?
So right now I'm doing I travel mostly to do my classes. I have my women's health massage business where I use the things I've learned as hydrotherapy, natural remedies, and our current goal is to have a home lifestyle in a way, so we can teach people how to eat healthy. We had our first, you could say, guest, our first patient last month, and she came and stayed with us for 2.5 days, and I did treatments. My mom and I taught her how to do healthy cooking, to reverse, how to, not to reverse, but how to, you know, live a healthy lifestyle. People that have issues can easily be helped with just diet. And so we taught her just the 8 laws of health. And so that's our goal right now. We just want to have a little home lifestyle so we can have a couple people come over, and hopefully soon our plan is to team up with Victoria and her family, and just, because we can have people come over, they can work on her farm, and just together be able to do lectures. And so at the churches, we're doing like hydrotherapy, natural remedies, and cooking classes. So that's kind of, just teaching everyone how to have a healthy lifestyle.
Man, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and to expand a little bit more on what she's saying, because I completely forgot, I was going to mention that in the beginning. The goal is to have a bigger lifestyle center here on our property, because we do have about 24 acres. The properties here are large, so we have 24 acres. They have close to 12 as well, and so the goal is to have a larger center here where we could give lectures, give classes, have a couple of rooms, and they too can have like a room so they can do treatments on their property. And then we'll kind of like, because as she mentioned, we're the ones who have the farm, their guests can come here, we can have guests here. So that's the overall plan. We do have a layout of the plan on our website, so you can look on there for anyone else who's interested. Does anyone else have any questions on Judith's story, or again, something spiritual? Okay, so we have Alyssa here that said, what advice would you give to young people on how to accept forgiveness from God and forgive themselves when they feel unworthy because they keep falling into temptations?
I would probably say it's just, God is so forgiving. I've talked to people about this, and I actually, I don't have it right now, but in Steps to Christ, I always give them Steps to Christ, because it talks about how worthy we are, how God would have died just for us, and how all those negative thoughts come from the devil, so we just have to keep pushing them to, we're never unworthy. God is there for us always. And the more we pray, the more we seek, we find. If we read the Bible, we find, wow, we'll always find answers when we seek, So it's kind of hard to telling them, when they're falling in temptations. But what I always say, being a Christian means falling and standing back up. We're gonna fall, and unfortunately, I fell a lot of times, but after a while, I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna keep trying. I'm just gonna get up. I'm just gonna get up. So I always tell everyone, you just have to get up. That's being a Christian, getting back up. Because a lot of people just fall there. No, we have to keep going. Otherwise, what's the point of life?
So in other words, don't give up. Keep standing up,
Yeah.
and keep reading your Bible, keep learning more about who God is, because I feel like a lot of people have this image of God that's like, oh, it might have been because of, family figure or figures at church, like, oh, I'm disappointed in you. How could you fall again? I can't believe you did that again. And so we kind of grow up with that mindset. But if we learn who God really is and see for ourselves, then I think it would be easier for us to forgive ourselves and accept that forgiveness from God and others, right?
Yeah.
All righty.
And one more thing. I I had a lady that I ended up talking to, and I highly recommend this course. I took it. It's called Biblical Response Therapy by Dan Gabbert, and that really helped me, because a lot of psychologists, not bringing psychologists down, but it's kind of like, they, in a way, they kind of just want to make you feel better. But she did this course with me, the Biblical Response Therapy, and it changed my life in a way that it wasn't just like, oh, why do you feel this? You feel this because of that. It was, why do you feel this? Okay, well, here we're gonna read this verse. And it was the Bible answering everything. And so for me, that was a huge step. So I recommend the Biblical Response Therapy for anyone that has kind of any emotional problem, even people that haven't gone through super intense things, learning how to forgive others, learning how to forgive themselves, and learning how to move forward only using the Bible. So it was amazing.
All right, there we go for those who who are interested, could you type it in the chat so people can maybe read it and look for it if they want to? And while she does that, does anyone else have anything they'd like to ask or comment? Okay, we have Fernando saying it's not a question, but thank you for that beautiful testimony. We got another thank you from Lou. Alrighty. Did she freeze on your guys' screen or is it just me? Yeah. Okay, we'll give her a little bit to come back and then, oh, she ended up coming out. Oh no. We'll wait a couple minutes, see if she comes back. But we'll go ahead and pray when she comes back. I see there's no more questions. And again, we will be having our, oh, there she is. We'll let her connect and come back.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
It's okay. We waited patiently for you. So we were just saying we're gonna go ahead and pray.
I
Oh,
don't have my headphones on. Hold on.
oh, okay.
Okay.
You were gonna type it in the chat, right? The course.
Yeah.
And then again, we will be having a testimony next week. If things go according to plan, we're actually going to be spotlighting her brother, also my cousin, and he too has a testimony of his own. Okay, there we go. Yes, on Tuesday, Joseph. So it's going to be Tuesdays every week, and should be the same time. Afterwards, I'll end the YouTube live stream. And if everyone wants to stay and give me their opinions on times and stuff, that would be good. So just stick around till the very end if you can. And yeah, so his name is, well, we call him Freddie, and he will be the speaker next week. Again, he has his own testimony while Judith was over here. He was doing his own set of crazy things. So we'll have a good time with him next week. And yes, the video will be staying on YouTube. So it will be live stream on there. If you don't get to make it to the Zoom meeting, or if you know someone doesn't have the password, just refer them to YouTube. It is being live streamed right now on there. Zoom is nice because you get to comment and you get to, ask questions and stuff. But, if you can't make it, YouTube works too. And it is on our YouTube channel, Some Flores Farm Ministries. So Judith, would you mind closing with a word of prayer, please?
Of course. Dear Father, thank you so much for this meeting. Thank you that we're still able to get together and talk about the wonderful things you've done for us, Father. I pray that you give each one of us strength. I pray that you can change our hearts, that we can reflect your character always, Father. Help us to prepare for your second coming. And I pray that you give each one of us the strength that we need to face the trials and temptations we're each facing. Thank you for Victoria for getting this together. And I pray that we can tell our friends and bring more people to you. So maybe that testimony that week can be a blessing for them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. And Joseph, the password and the Zoom ID and the password is not going to be changing. So if you have that, you can just use that for the upcoming meetings. I'm going to go ahead and end the YouTube and live stream. And then if you all could just stay for a second so I could just ask you all a couple questions. Alrighty. So thank you for everyone who's watching on YouTube, and hopefully we'll see you next week through the website. I will post it in the comments and in the description of this live stream. You can request the password. It is just, your name and your email, and then we'll send you the password. It might go to junk mail or